Alright. We are on chapter 7. A Name of Power. On the way home, Roran said, "There was a stranger from Therinsford at horse today." "What's his name?" asked Eragon. He sidestepped a patch of ice and continued walking at a brisk pace. His cheeks and eyes burned from the cold. "Dempton. He came here to have Horst forge some sockets," said Roran. His stocky legs plowed through the drift, clearing a way for Eragon. "Doesn't Therinsford have its own smith?" "Yes," replied Roran, "but he isn't skilled enough." He glanced at Eragon. With a shrug, he added, "Dempton needs some sockets for his mill. He's expanding it and offered me a job. If I accept, I'll leave with him while he picks up the sockets." Millers worked all year. During the winter, they ground whatever people brought them. But in the harvest season, they bought grain and sold it as flour. It was hard, dangerous work. Workers often lost fingers or hands in the giant millstones. "Are you going to tell Garrow?" asked Eragon. "Yes." A grimly amused smile played across Roran's face. "What for? You know what he thinks about us going away. It'll only cause trouble if you say anything. Forget about it so we can eat tonight's dinner in peace." "I can't. I'm going to take the job." Eragon halted. "Why?" They faced each other, their breath visible in the air. "I know money is hard to come by, but we always manage to survive. You don't have to leave." "No, I don't. But the money is for myself." Roran tried to resume walking, but Eragon refused to budge. "What do you need it for?" he demanded. Roran's shoulders straightened slightly. "I want to marry." Bewilderment and astonishment overwhelmed Eragon. He remembered seeing Katrina and Roran kissing during the trader's visit, but marriage? Katrina? He asked weakly just to confirm. Roran nodded. "Have you asked her?" "Not yet, but come spring, when I can raise a house, I will." "There's too much work on the farm for you to leave now," protested Eragon. "Wait until we're ready for planting." "No," said Roran, laughing slightly. Spring's the time I'll need the most. The ground will have been furrowed and sown. The crops must be weeded, not to mention all the other chores. No, this is the best time for me to go, when all we really do is wait for the seasons to change. You and Garrow can make do without me. If all goes well, I'll soon be looking back on the farm with a wife. I'll soon be working on the farm with a wife." Eragon reluctantly conceded that Roran made sense. He shook his head, but whether with amazement or anger he knew not. I guess I can only wish for you the best of luck. But Garrow may take this with ill humor. We will see." They resumed walking, the silence a barrier between them. Eragon's heart was disturbed. It would take him time before he could look upon this development with favor. When they arrived home, Roran did not tell Garrow of his plans, but Eragon was sure that he would soon. Eragon went to see the dragon for the first time since it had spoken to him. He approached apprehensively, aware now that it was an equal. "Eragon, is that all you can say?" he snapped. "Yes." His eyes widened at the unexpected reply, and he sat down roughly. Now it has a sense of humor. What next? Impulsively, he broke a dead branch with his foot. Roran's announcement had put him in a foul mood. A questioning thought came from the dragon, so he told it what happened. As he talked, his voice grew steadily louder until he was yelling pointlessly into the air. He ranted until his emotions were spent, then ineffectively punched the ground. "I don't want him to go, that's all," he said helplessly. The dragon watched impassively, listening and learning. Eragon mumbled a few choice curses and rubbed his eyes. He looked at the dragon thoughtfully. "You need a name. I heard some interesting ones today. Perhaps you'll like one." Mentally, he ran through the list Brom had given him until he found two names that struck him as heroic, noble, and pleasing to the ear. What do you think of Valinor or his successor, Eredor? Both were great dragons. No, said the dragon. It sounded amused with his efforts. ERAGON. That's my name. You can't have it, he said, rubbing his chin. Well, if you don't like those, there are others. He continued through the list, but the dragon rejected every one he proposed. It seemed to be laughing at something ERAGON did not understand, but he ignored it and kept suggesting names. There was Ingot Hold. He slew a revelation stopped him. That's the problem. I've been choosing male names. You're a she. Yes. The dragon folded her wings smugly. Now that he knew what to look for, he came up with half a dozen names. He toyed with Myrmel, but that did not fit. After all, it was the name of a brown dragon. Ophelia and Lenora were also discarded. He was about to give up when he remembered the last name Brom had muttered. ERAGON liked it, but would the dragon? He asked. Are you Saphira? She looked at him with intelligent eyes. Deep in his mind, he felt her satisfaction. Yes. Something clicked in his head, and her voice echoed, as if from a great distance. He grinned in response. Saphira started humming. Chapter 8. A Miller to Be. The sun had set by the time dinner was served. A blustery wind howled outside, shaking the house. ERAGON eyed Roran closely and waited for the inevitable. Finally, I was offered a job at Theronford's mill, which I planned to take. Garrow finished a mouthful of food with deliberate slowness and laid down his fork. He leaned back in his chair, then interlaced his fingers behind his head and uttered one dry word. Why? Roran explained while ERAGON absently picked at his food. I see, was Garrow's only comment. He fell silent and stared at the ceiling. No one moved as they awaited his response. Well, when do you leave? What? Asked Roran. Garrow leaned forward with a twinkle in his eye. Did you think I would stop you? I hoped you would marry soon. It would be good to see this family growing again. Katrina will be lucky to have you. Astonishment raced over Roran's face. Then he settled into a relieved grin. So when do you leave? Garrow asked. Roran regained his voice. When Dempton returns to get the sockets for the mill. Garrow nodded. And that will be in 2 weeks. Good. That'll give us some time to prepare. It'll be different to have the house to ourselves, but if nothing goes amiss, it shouldn't be for too long. He looked over the table and asked, ERAGON, did you know of this? He shrugged, ruefully. Not until today. It's madness. Garrow ran a hand over his face. It's life's natural course. He pushed himself up from the chair. All will be fine. Time will settle everything. For now, though, let's clean these dishes. ERAGON and Roran helped him in silence. The next few days were trying. ERAGON's temper was frayed. Except for curtly answering direct questions, he spoke to no one. There were still small reminders everywhere that Roran was leaving. Garrow making him pack, things missing from the walls, and the strange emptiness that filled the house. It was almost a week before he realized that the distance had grown between Roran and him. When they spoke, the words did not come easily, and their conversations were uncomfortable. Saphira was a balm for ERAGON's frustration. He could talk freely with her. His emotions were completely open to her mind, and she understood him better than anyone else. During the weeks before Roran's departure, she went through another growth spurt. She gained 12 inches at the shoulder, which was now higher than ERAGON's. He found that the small hollow where her neck joined her shoulders was a perfect place to sit. He often rested there in the evenings and scratched her neck while explaining the meanings of different words. Soon she understood everything he said and frequently commented on it. For ERAGON, this part of his life was delightful. Saphira was as real and complex as any person. Her personality was electric, and at times completely alien. Yet they understood each other on a profound level. Her actions and thoughts constantly revealed new aspects of her character. Once she caught an eagle, and instead of eating it, released it, saying, "No hunter of the sky should end his days as prey. Better to die on the wing than pinned to the ground." Eragon's plan to let his family see Saphira was dispelled by Roran's announcement and Saphira's own cautionary words. She was reluctant to be seen, and he, partly out of selfishness, agreed. The moment her existence was divulged, he knew that shouts, accusations, and fear would be directed at him. So he procrastinated. He told himself to wait for a sign that it was the right time. The night before Roran was to leave, Eragon went to talk with him. He stalked down the hallway to Roran's open door. An oil lamp rested on the nightstand, painting the walls with warm, flickering light. The bedposts cast long, elongated shadows on empty shelves that rose to the ceiling. Roran, his eyes shaded and the back of his neck tense, was rolling blankets around his clothes and belongings. He paused, then picked up something from the pillow and bounced it in his hand. It was a polished rock Eragon had given him years ago. Roran started to tuck it into the bundle, then stopped and set it on the shelf. A hard lump formed in Eragon's throat, and he left. Chapter 9. Strangers in Carvahall. Breakfast was cold, but the tea was hot. Ice inside the windows had melted with the morning fire and soaked into the wood floor, staining it with dark puddles. Eragon looked at Garrow and Roran by the kitchen stove and reflected that this would be the last time that he saw them together for many months. Roran sat in the chair, lacing his boots. His pack full rested on the floor next to him. Garrow stood between them, with his hands sunk deep into his pockets. His shirt hung loosely, his skin looked drawn. Despite the young man's cajoling, he refused to go with him. When pressed for a reason, he only said that it was for the best. "Do you have everything?" Garrow asked Roran. "Yes." He nodded and took a small pouch from his pocket. Coins clinked as he handed it to Roran. "I've been saving this for you. It isn't much, but if you wish to buy some bauble or trinket, it will suffice." "Thank you, but I won't be spending my money on trifles," said Roran. "Do what you will. It is yours," said Garrow. "I've nothing else to give except a father's blessing. Take it if you wish, but it is worth little." Roran's voice was thick with emotion. "I would be honored to receive it." "Then do, and go in peace," said Garrow, and kissed him on the forehead. He turned and said in a louder voice, "Do not think I have forgotten you, Eragon. I have words for both of you. It's time I said them. You are entering the world. Heed them, and they will serve you well." He bent his gaze sternly on them. "First, let no one rule your mind or body. Take special care that your thoughts remain unfiltered. One may be a free man, yet bound tighter than a slave. Give men your ear, but not your heart. Show respect for those in power, but don't follow them blindly. Judge with logic and reason, but comment not. Consider none your superior, whatever the rank or station in life. Treat all fairly, or they will seek revenge. Be careful with your money. Hold fast to your beliefs, and others will listen." He continued at a slower pace. "Of the affairs of love, my only advice is to be honest. That's your most powerful tool to unlock the heart or gain forgiveness. That is all I have to say." He seemed slightly self-conscious of his speech. He hoisted Roran's pack. "Now you must go. Dawn is approaching, and Dempton will be waiting." Roran shouldered the pack and hugged Garrow. "I will return as soon as I can," he said. "Good," replied Garrow. "But go now and don't worry about us." They parted reluctantly. Eragon and Roran went outside, then turned and waved. Garrow raised a bony hand, his eyes grave, and watched as they trudged to the road. After a long moment he shut the door. As the sound carried through the morning air, Roran halted. Eragon looked back and surveyed the land. His eyes lingered on the lone buildings. They looked pitifully small and fragile. A thin finger of smoke trailing up from the house was the only proof that the snowbound farm was inhabited. "There is our whole world," Roran observed somberly. Eragon shivered impatiently and grumbled. "A good one, too." Roran nodded, then straightened his shoulders and headed into his new future. The house disappeared from view as they descended the hill. It was still early when they reached Carvahall, but they found the smithy doors already open. The air inside was pleasantly warm. Baldur slowly worked two large bellows attached to the side of a stone forge filled with sparkling coals. Before the forge stood a black anvil and an iron-bound barrel filled with brine. From a line of neck-high poles protruding from walls hung rows of items: giant tongs, pliers, hammers in every shape and weight, chisels, angles, center punches, files, rasps, lathes, bars of iron and steel waiting to be shaped, vises, shears, picks, and shovels. Horse and Dempton stood next to a long table. Dempton approached with a smile beneath his flamboyant red mustache. "Roran, I'm glad you came. There's going to be more work than I can handle with my new grindstones. Are you ready to go?" Roran hefted his pack. "Yes. Do we leave soon?" "I've a few things to take care of first, but then we'll be off in an hour." Eragon shifted his feet as Dempton turned to him, tugging at the corner of his mustache. "You must be Eragon. I would offer you this job too, but Roran got the only one. Maybe in a year or two, eh?" Eragon smiled uneasily and shook his hand. The man was friendly. Under other circumstances, Eragon would have liked him. But right then, he sourly wished that the miller had never come to Carvahall. Dempton huffed. "Good, very good." He returned to his attention to Roran and started to explain how the mill worked. "They're ready to go," interrupted Horst, gesturing at the table where several bundles rested. "You can take them wherever you want to go." They shook hands, and Horst left the smithy, beckoning Eragon on the way out. Interested, Eragon followed. He found the smith standing in the street with his arms crossed. Eragon thrust his thumb back toward the miller and said, "What do you think of him?" Horst rumbled, "A good man. He'll do fine with Roran." He absently brushed metal fillings off his apron, then put a massive hand on Eragon's shoulder. "Lad, do you remember the fight you had with Sloane?" "If you're asking about payment for the meat, I haven't forgotten." "No, I trust you, lad. What I want to know is if you still have the blue stone." Eragon's heart fluttered. What does he want to know? Maybe someone saw Saphira? Struggling not to panic, he said, "I do, but why do you ask?" "As soon as you are to return home, get rid of it." Horst overrode Eragon's exclamation. "Two men arrived here yesterday. Strange fellows, dressed in black and carrying swords. It made my skin crawl just looking at them. Last evening, they started asking people if a stone like yours had been found. They're at it again today." Eragon blanched. No one with any sense said anything. No one with any sense said anything. They know trouble when they see it. But I could name a few people who will talk. Dread filled Eragon's heart. Whoever had sent the stone into the spine had finally tracked it down. Let's see. Whoever had sent the spine into the stone had finally tracked it down. Or perhaps the Empire had learned of Saphira. He did not know which could be worse. Think. The egg is gone. It's impossible for them to find it now. But if they know what it was, it'll be obvious what happened. Saphira might be in danger. It took all of his self-control to retain a casual air. "Thanks for telling me. Do you know where they are?" He was proud that his voice barely trembled. I didn't warn you because I thought you needed to meet those men. Leave Carvahall. Go home. All right, said Eragon to placate the smith. If you think I should, I do. Horst's face softened. I may be overreacting, but these strangers give me a bad feeling. It would be better if you stayed home until they leave. I'll try to keep them away from your farm, though it may not do any good. Eragon looked at him gratefully. He wished he could tell him about Saphira. I'll leave now, he said, and hurried back to Roran. Eragon clasped his cousin's arm and bade him farewell. Aren't you going to stay for a while? Roran asked with surprise. Eragon almost laughed. For some reason, the question struck him as funny. There's nothing more for me to do, and I'm not going to stand around until you go. Well, said Roran doubtfully, I guess this is the last time we'll see each other for a few months. I'm sure it won't seem that long, said Eragon hastily. Take care, and come back soon. He hugged Roran, then left. Horst was still in the street. Aware that the smith was watching, Eragon headed to the outskirts of Carvahall. Once the smithy was out of sight, he ducked behind a house and snuck back through the village. Eragon kept to the shadows where he searched the street, listening for the slightest noise. Oh, he yawns. His thoughts flashed to his room, where his bow hung. He wished that it was in his hand. He prowled across Carvahall, avoiding anyone, until he heard a sibilant voice from a house. Although his ears were keen, he had to strain to hear what was being said. When did this happen? The words were smooth, like oiled glass, and seemed to worm their way through the air. Underlying the speech was a strange hiss that made his scalp prickle. About 3 months ago, someone else answered. Oh, about 3 months ago, someone else answered. Eragon identified him as Sloane. Shade's blood, he's telling them. He resolved to punch Sloane the next time they met. A third person spoke. The voice was deep and moist. It conjured up images of creeping decay, mold, and other things best left untouched. Are you sure? We would hate to think that you made a mistake. If that were so, it would be most unpleasant. Eragon could imagine only too well what they might do. Would anyone but the Empire dare threaten people like that? Probably not, but whoever sent the egg might be powerful enough to use force with impunity. Yeah, I'm sure. He had it then. I'm not lying. Plenty of people know about it. Go ask them. Sloane sounded shaken. He said something else that Eragon did not catch. They have been rather uncooperative. The words were derisive. There was a pause. Your information has been helpful. We will not forget you. Eragon believed him. Sloane muttered something. Then Eragon heard someone hurrying away. He peered around the corner to see what was happening. The two men stood tall in the street. Both were dressed in long black cloaks that were lifted by sheaths poking past their legs. On their shirts were insignias intricately wrought with a silver thread. Hoods shaded their faces, and their hands were covered by gloves. Their backs were oddly humped, as though their clothes were stuffed with padding. Eragon shifted slightly to get a better view. One of the strangers stiffened and grunted peculiarly to his companion. They both swiveled around and sank into crouches. Eragon's breath caught. Mortal fear clenched him. His eyes locked onto their hidden faces, and a stifling power fell over his mind, keeping him in place. He struggled against it and screamed to himself, "Move!" His legs swayed, but to no avail. The strangers stalked towards him with a smooth, noiseless gait. He knew they could see his face now. They were almost to the corner, hands grasping at swords. "Eragon!" He jerked as his name was called. The strangers froze in place and hissed. Brahm hurried towards them from the side, head bare and staff in hand. The strangers were blocked from the old man's view. Eragon tried to warn him, but his tongue and arms would not stir. "Eragon!" cried Brahm again. The strangers gave one last look, then slipped away between the houses. Eragon collapsed on the ground, shivering. Sweat beaded on his forehead and made his palms sticky. The old man offered Eragon a hand and pulled him up with a strong arm. "You look sick. Is all well?" Eragon gulped and nodded mutely. His eyes flickered around, searching for anything unusual. "I just got dizzy all of a sudden. It's past. It was very odd. I don't know what happened." "You'll recover," said Brahm, "but perhaps it would be better if you went home." "Yes, I have to get home. Have to get there before they do. I think you're right. Maybe I'm getting ill." "Then home is the best place for you. It's a long walk, but I'm sure you'll feel better by the time you arrive. Let me escort you to the road." Eragon did not protest as Brahm took his arm and led him away at a quick pace. Brahm's staff crunched in the snow as they passed the houses. "Why were you looking for me?" Brahm shrugged. "Simple curiosity. I learned you were in town and wondered if you would have remembered the name of that traitor." "Traitor? What is he talking about?" Eragon stared blankly. His confusion caught the attention of Brahm's probing eyes. "No," he said, and then amended himself. "I'm afraid I still don't remember." Brahm sighed gruffly, as if something had been confirmed, and rubbed his eagle nose. "Well then, if you do, come tell me. I am more interested in this traitor who pretends to know so much about dragons." Eragon nodded with a distracted air. They walked in silence to the road. Then Brahm said, "Hasten home. I don't think it would be a good idea to tarry on the way." He offered a gnarled hand. Eragon shook it, but as he let go, something in Brahm's hand caught in his mitt and pulled it off. It fell to the ground. The old man picked it up. "Clumsy of me," he apologized, and handed it back. As Eragon took the mitt, Brahm's strong fingers wrapped around his wrist and twisted sharply. His palm briefly faced upward, revealing the silvery mark. Brahm's eyes glinted, but he let Eragon yank his hand back and jam it into his mitt. "Goodbye," Eragon forced out, perturbed, and hurried down the road. Behind him, he heard Brahm whistling a merry tune. And that is where we'll stop. Until I start again.